Hello everybody and welcome to the inaugural episode of Riders Rigs, where we check out Riders Rigs. Now Gandalf said something to the effect of, if you want to talk to the smartest person in the room, you need to talk to yourself. That being the case, let me introduce you to our guest, our very first guest, none other than your host, Dominic Wilrig. Hi Dominic, welcome to the show.
Yeah, hi Dominic. And I'm totally honored to be the first guest on your show.
You didn't have anywhere better to be.
Well, you got me there.
Boring conversation anyways. What do we have here?
Yeah, so this is the star of my fleet of two bikes. It's the 2014 Santa Cruz Bronson 1.0.
Okay, so by 1.0, I assume you mean that there are revised versions of this bike out now.
Yeah, that's right. So I think it was last year Santa Cruz released an updated version of this bike, changed the geometry a little bit, and then changed the way the pivots worked and whatnot. So that's the origin of the 1.0 versus the 2.0 moniker.
Okay, so it's a Santa Cruz Bronson 1.0. What size frame is it?
Yeah, so this one is a large frame. I'm 5'10", which kind of places me right in the middle between split right between a large frame and a medium frame with most manufacturers. I've ridden a lot of medium frame bikes at demos recently, and I have to say that I really like having the large frame, at least with the Santa Cruz. It puts me in a comfortable position in the cockpit. It's not overly cramped.
I know what you're saying. Recently we did that demo on the Yeti SB6. They put us in a medium frame and it just felt cramped compared to this.
Dude, I know, and we were really looking forward to riding that bike. The body position kind of felt like it was too far forward with that bike, and subconsciously, we were worried the whole time about just going over the handlebars and anything technical.
Okay, well back to this bike, the frame. Is it carbon or aluminum?
Carbon. So this one is a carbon C, and it gets confusing because at the time Santa Cruz only had one level of carbon. Now they have two, and they got the carbon C and the carbon CC. One's lighter and more expensive. The other one is a little heavier and cheaper. They both have supposedly the same strength, but the carbon C is what used to be the carbon C is now the carbon CC. So in today's vernacular, this would be a carbon CC, but at the time it was made, it's a carbon C.
Did any of you watching at home follow that?
Easy. All right, so you can also tell that it's carbon when you look at the shock mounts in particular. On the alloy versions, they have open webbing, and then also the welds are just really obvious, and obviously you don't have welds on the carbon.
Okay, anything special about the cable routing?
Only in that it has stealth routing for the dropper post.
All right, so by that you mean the cable routing for the dropper post is partially internal?
Yeah, otherwise you'd have to get a dropper post with full external routing, and those open themselves up to just a little bit more opportunity for damage and failure on the trail. But they do switch from bike to bike a little easier, so it's a little bit of a catch-22.
I assume the seat post is the current standard diameter?
Yeah, so it's 30.9 millimeters, and why it's not 31, I have no clue. If any of you out there have the answer to that question and want to put it in the comments below, I'd love to know the answer.
Okay, so now let's dig into the geometry. What's the head angle?
Yeah, it's like that joke from the Sandra Bullock movie, instead of being April 21st, it's 67 degrees, which is, my favorite temperature. Not too hot, not too cold.
Okay, so that's the slacker end of the spectrum, but by no means super slack. What's the seat tube angle?
Okay, so it's 73 degrees, and I'm only now just starting to understand the relationship between the seat tube angle and the head tube length and the rest of the geometry on the bike. So if your body weight's too far back in a high torque situation when you're climbing, that front end is just going to lift off, and you're going to lose your traction, lose your control as you're climbing. So you'd have a lot more aborted climbs. This one I've just gotten really accustomed to it because it is my main bike. But recently I rode like a Kona Process 134, which I think has a little steeper seat tube angle, and that one resulted in a lot of aborted technical climbs. It just got annoying. It was super fun bike on the downhill, not so much fun on the climb.
Okay, so what is the top tube length and the seat tube length on this bike?
It's 24 for the top and 18.5 for the seat tube, but obviously with a dropper post the real length varies. I've never measured what my preferred pedal position is.
You might want to look into that. What about the chainstay length?
It's 17.3, but don't ask me how that affects ride feel because I still don't have my head wrapped around that one.
That makes two of us. Final frame question. Will it hold a water bottle?
Yes. Thank God. Oh man, I'll tell you what. So when we rode that Santa Cruz, or not Santa Cruz, or that Yeti SB6 demo, the first thing, almost one of the first things we noticed was there's no room for a bottle cage, and you know, that wouldn't be a deal breaker, but you know, obviously it was an inconclusive ride because of the frame size, but that is a big negative, and thankfully the Santa Cruz Bronson does not have that problem. You know, as a fact, I think that they recently posted a picture of the new Nomad having enough room for a bottle to hold a bear spray on it. So there's that.
Okay, suspension. What do we have for front forks?
It's a Fox Float 34 Evolution Series, whatever that is. Honestly, I leave them wide open all the time, and I don't really notice any difference in the way it climbs.
Okay, and the rear suspension?
It's a Fox Float. Again, it's a CTD.
Okay, and do I see that this has a Kashima coating?
Yep, Kashima.
Okay, and what does it have for travel?
It's 150 millimeters, both front and rear.
Okay, so just shy of like 6 inches.
Yeah, I guess so. So if that's what Google told you, then yeah.
Okay, so anything you want to share as far as thoughts on the rear shock?
Not really. You know, honestly, I don't know a ton about the shock settings and how to adjust it and rebound and all that kind of stuff. I do know that the CTD switch, if I put it all the way to stiff when I'm climbing on a low gentle climb, I do seem to notice the difference. But as far as anything else, you know, it doesn't seem to make a hill of difference on short technical climbs.
A hill of difference?
Huh? I was curious if you were going to catch that. Yeah, good catch. All puns intended.
Okay, so now let's switch gears to the drivetrain.
Who's punning it up now, huh? Switching gears?
Ha. So what do you expect out here?
Yeah, it's a Shimano XT11 system with 3 rings on the front.
It's a little old school, isn't it? 3 rings in the front? Everybody's in a 1 by now.
Well, it's basically just 2 rings because the big ring is a bash guard for all intensive purposes.
Yeah, I can see that. There's hardly any teeth on that ring. Got rocks?
Yeah, we got rocks. You know, on the single speed thing, I've ridden a bunch of demo bikes with a single speed system, including a couple with the Eagle, and I never even bothered using the bottom 1 or 2 rings in those systems. So I'm pretty neutral on the whole single speed thing. I take it or leave it. It's definitely simpler.
Well, the only good front derailleur is no derailleur.
Exactly. So the extra rings are like 3 bash guards. They're just a little heavier.
All right, so why the Shimano XT?
Now, when I spec'd this bike out when I bought it, I'd been riding a real cheap bike with entry-level components, and I honed in on the XT level because the XTR is for racing. It's lighter, so I figured it's gonna balance out for weight versus durability, and I wanted something more durable. And conversely, on the other end of the spectrum, with the lower end parts, you start getting a lot of plastic in there, so I figured they're built cheaper and again less durable. So I figured the XT would be like the tank of the series, and you know, a couple thousand miles later, I hardly ever have to have these adjusted unless you count replacing rear derailleurs.
And how many of those did you go through?
Pretty sure it's my 3rd, but don't quote me on that. It might be as many as 5 now.
That seems like a lot.
Yeah, it is. I had one that got caught by a sapling and bent around. That was pretty awesome. And then the rest of them, I think, were just going through rock gardens and cutting it too close to rocks through rock gardens and that kind of things at slower speeds.
Well, I think that beats cross-country trails, don't you think?
Yeah, to each their own. But the guys that ride those trails probably think that we're crazy too.
Okay, so I see a chain guard on the lower swing arm, but what about a chain guide?
Honestly, I haven't felt the need. I haven't thrown a chain in a long time, and I think it's probably a bigger deal if you're riding a bike with a single speed. So that might be another advantage to having a front derailleur, or one of the only 2 advantages, aside from the bash guard.
I can pick up what you're laying down. What about the cranks and the pedals?
Well, the cranks are what came with the bike, and they're so worn out from riding that you can hardly tell what brand they are. The pedals are Crank Brothers Mallet E's, and I switched from Shimano SPDs, the type with a bit of a platform on them. And with my shoes, which are 510 Hellcats, it's been a bit of a transition trying to get everything fitted right, because the shoes are not your normal mountain bike shoe. They're definitely a wider shoe. So we're talking razor blade modifications to the sole, nylon bushings on the pedals. Any trick I could try to think of to kind of make it so it didn't rub as bad, because it was annoying. It was like a squeak.
Okay, so why did you switch?
All right, well, the bearings were worn out in my Shimano's, and it was so obviously it was a time for a change. I was curious about the Crank Brothers, so in the name of bike science, I decided to try the Crank Brothers. And to be honest, it's just been a pain so far, so my jury's kind of out. But I should also mention that I'm riding a atypical mountain bike shoe. It's a 510 Hellcat, and it's a very different, not your normal mountain bike shoe.
How is that?
Well, I think they're superior to every other mountain bike shoe out there, at least in my humble opinion. They feel completely natural when you're walking in them, and which is not a feel that you get with a mountain bike shoe. And the sole feels normal. It feels completely normal. On the downside, they're heavy and they're bulky, neither of which are things that concern me.
All right, switching gears, what about the chain?
Standard Shimano, not the race stuff. As I said, I avoid the race stuff. I think the engineering emphasis on that's always going to be on weight, and so you're going to sacrifice durability when you're going for weight. So that's kind of my take on it. I don't get the race level components. I just go with standard.
Okay, the bottom bracket, is it threaded or press fit?
It's threaded, and Santa Cruz played up in their marketing that that was a better, a more durable system or something like that. I'm not sure that it matters, but I do think they have a point, because it's better to be able to work on something like that with the type of tools that I have here versus some kind of crazy specialty tool that unless you're a bike mechanic, you don't need. So that said, I've never had to take it apart, so I don't know that it really matters.
Okay, what about the height?
I should probably know, but I got no clue.
I looked it up, it's 13.6.
So why ask?
I'm the host, I'm supposed to ask the questions.
Well, then ask the next question already.
Okay then, brakes, what do you have?
Well, hydraulic, of course. So these are Shimano Dior level, and I've 180 millimeter rotors on these. The braking power on like the XT or the high-end SRAM is noticeably different on the demo bikes I've ridden, in that they have more braking power. So yeah, it's pretty high on my list of next upgrades for this bike, or any bike, is to upgrade the braking power now that I understand it better.
Okay, so the stopping power, is it really that noticeable?
Oh yeah, if you jump from one bike to the next, you'll definitely notice the difference in braking power. That said, I'm not sure that I felt the need for the increase in braking power. It's just an upgrade that I'd like to have.
Okay, so you say you notice the difference, but you don't feel the need for an upgrade. How much of that might be that you've adapted to your bike's braking power?
That's a good question, and I'm glad I thought of it. So I think we're really gonna have to think about that one.
Yeah, do that. What about the wheels, the hubs, the tires?
Yeah, so this is an area where I have spent some real money on upgrades. When I bought the bike, it had WTB Wilderness Trail Bikes, STI 23 rims, and then that had the Maxxis high rollers, and I think they were 2.2s. That was my first time running tubeless, and I was absolutely in heaven with the bike and everything about that. But the bike world has kind of evolved since then, and tire widths have been getting wider, and I went with that. So as I increased my tires to wider tires, like 2.4s, I was real happy with the increase in traction, but I was starting to have some pretty serious other problems. And as a result, I have learned an awful lot about tire width and wheel diameters and things of that nature.
For those of you still watching at home, that'd be the internal width.
Bingo. And as the name implies, the STI 23s from WTB, the 23 stands for 23 millimeters. And so that would be the inside diameter of the wheel. So I increased my tire size with everybody else, went up to like the 2.4s, but with those 23 millimeter rims, it was causing all kinds of burps and blowouts. But I liked the feel of the tire and the traction increase that I felt like I was getting with the wider tire, so I didn't want to go back to a narrower tire, so I actually opted for tubes. And I think another option is you could probably increase your air pressure a whole lot, and that will just kind of circumvent the problem. But then you may as well be running tubes.
Plus, in my opinion, anytime you go over 20 psi, you basically turn your bike into a pogo stick.
Exactly. I mean, you may as well not have a suspension then. So ultimately what I did is I went with a Stan's Arc MK3 rim, which has a 26 millimeter inside diameter, and 250 miles later I have no burps, no blowouts. They have held their pressure and they have worked flawlessly. It's probably the best upgrade I've ever done, maybe even better than a dropper post. It's debatable, but I think it's up there with a dropper post. So I think my only regret is that I didn't actually go with the Stan's Flow MK3. The Flow has a 29 millimeter inside diameter.
Okay. So why would that be a regret?
Well, because it's clear to me that this bike will support a much wider tire, a 2.6 for sure, a 2.7 maybe, and I'm not talking about like the real like low profile, real rounded race tires that are all about speed. I'm talking about the big, gnarly, knobby tires that are for downhill, like I'm running right now with these Maxxis Shorties, or even the Wet Scream or something like that, or the Magic Marys, which it'll support a much larger tire. And but the wheels that I chose won't support it. So I'm never going to go back to like a 2.2. If anything, I'd like to experiment with wider tires, but I cannot do that with the rims that I have on the Arcs. I would have had to have had the Flows, and there's nobody out there that will tell you that, because it's not what the manufacturers say about the bike. But I mean, clearly if you look at it, it's got the space. So it would have been nice to be able to play around with that kind of option.
Okay. What about the hubs?
Well, I can't really speak in depth about the hubs. These are the Neo hubs that came with the stands. Previously, I had the DT Swiss. I think the only comment that I have is that these hubs are definitely louder than the DT Swiss, but above and beyond that, I have no idea.
So you already talked a little bit about the tires when we were talking about the wheels, but what's the story with this bike when it comes to tires?
Well, so for now, I'm absolutely in love with these Maxxis Shorties. They're big, they're knobby, and they've got like a flatter profile, like a flat top haircut versus like straight buzz cut, which is how most mountain bike tires are, or most tires in general have that kind of round profile to them. Nothing scientific about this, but I kind of feel like the flatter profile has more traction surface, and thus more traction on rocks at lower speeds, especially if they're like these and the rubber compound is just really, really soft and grippy, gooey, kind of almost melt in your hands rubber.
Okay, example.
Okay, so let's take, for example, on one hand the Shorty and the Vittoria Goma. The Goma both those tires are very knobby tires. The Goma's a little rounder than the Shorty, as far as profile, but they're both in the same ballpark. Now, the difference is when you take the rubber and you start playing with the rubber on the Goma, by comparison with a Shorty, the rubber may as well be rocks. I mean, it's really hard. And then you grab the Shorty and it sticks to your hand like honey. And the Vittoria Goma just doesn't do that. So that's the difference in the rubber compound, and that's why I really like this tire. Like a middle ground between those two tires would be the Magic Mary from Schwalbe.
Okay, I see you're running the same tire front and rear.
Yeah, I like to keep things simple. I mean, there's good arguments for running different tires front and rear, but honestly, I just don't care.
Okay, so let's talk about the Cockpit then. Handlebars?
Yeah, I know this is not in vogue right now, but I'm just not 100% convinced in the 800 mils. These are 740, and I find that they work just fine for me. I mean, if you're in a wide open space with a downhill scenario, I think there's probably a solid argument for the wider handlebars, but I mean, these are plenty wide, and definitely wider than they used to be 10 years ago. And on the East Coast trails and the woodlands, the 740 mils just work great for me.
Okay, what about the stem?
It's stock, and the Cockpit feels perfect on this. I have had no inclination to play around with the stem at all.
What about the grips? I see you have bolt-on.
Yeah, those are a must. Not only because I break down and ship the bike a lot, but also because they offer a more consistent guarantee of grip between the handlebar and the grip itself.
Yeah, sometimes in really hot and humid conditions, those slide-on grips, they kind of twist and they turn when you got a grip on them.
Yeah, and with these, exactly. I'm always 100% sure of my grip, especially when I mix them with a good glove.
Okay, so let's move on from the digging all over all the technical little details on this bike and get into the thoughts and observations part of the show and Q&A. An important factor for what I got planned for the show, this particular series of videos, is basically talking about the thoughts and observations on the bike over a beer. Ta-da!
Right on. Cheers.
Hey Dominic, you know the best part of interviewing myself for this episode, right?
Yeah, twice as much beer for you than me.
Exactly. All right, so easy question. How many miles are on the bike?
Okay, well in the 2.5 years I've had it, it's about 1,500 miles, if you believe my Strava profile.
It's not bad. It's better than most, but there's still a lot more guys out there that do way more miles than that.
Well, I mean, yeah, I'd like to get 1,500 miles in a year, but got a full-time job and you got to do what you got to do. You ride when you can.
Don't forget the kids.
Right, you cannot forget and underemphasize the effect family has on your time.
And the climb, how's the climb?
All right, so when I got this bike, I thought it was probably the best climbing full suspension bike on the market. And that was pretty much true at the time, but geometry and tech has progressed so much in the last couple of years that most of the newer bikes that are coming out on the market climb as good, or in most cases better than this one in a full suspension bike.
Okay, and example?
All right, well, let's take the Yeti SB6 for example. Recently we did a demo on that one, and that bike climbed. It was probably the best climbing bike we've ever had. The descent was a different story. If you want to see, there's actually a video on that. You can look down in the description and I'll have a link there. And so also in that same period, we did demos on 2.0 versions of the Bronson and the Santa Cruz 5010, or Solo as I like to call it. And my previous bike, to back up a little bit in history, my previous bike was a Hero Flightline 2, which is component-wise barely above a Walmart bike, to be honest. The frame, the component level of the frame, and like the head, that's all pretty good build. I would trust that on real crazy trails. But the component level was crap, and the shocks were crap, and it was all entry level. That bike compared to this bike. So this bike, when I got this one, compared to my previous bike, was like a helicopter. It flew itself up the hill. It floated over everything. It was just absolutely blew my mind. When I got on the Santa Cruz Bronson 2.0 recently, which that's also the video I have, and you can see the link in the description to go watch that one. When I demoed that bike, this bike compared to that bike, same thing. Not quite as dramatic, but it felt to me like the difference between this one and my old hardtail entry level was the same between the 2.0 Bronson and the 1.0 Bronson. They had in 3 years changed the bike that much. And I mean, I know they can't keep that up forever, but it's just amazing. The new bikes just continually, they climb better, they descend better. The last couple of years have been amazing for what has happened in mountain bikes.
Okay, so the climb is starting to become dated and obsolete. What about the descent?
Well, it might just be the fact that that this is my bike and I'm really used to it, but this is my favorite bike to descend on, bar none.
Yeah, I kind of think that plays into the whole bike versus rider argument. Is it the bike? Is it the rider?
Okay, so I think the answer is both. So I've ridden this bike, all over the place, from the pedal fest stuff in the Midwest to rocky, gnarly pay-to-play here to some grand vista stuff out west in California and places like that. I've even ridden this in the flats of like Miami at some of the trails down there. And I am 100% comfortable with the way this one descends. I mean, I know there's some better bikes out there, but the problem with all the bikes for specific purposes, either you have the money for them or you don't, which I don't. And the problem is that you never really get to get comfortable with a bunch of different bikes because you don't get to ride them on the trail conditions that allow you to really know what the bike's capable of. So, buying a bike is kind of like buying a bike blind, and I did kind of buy this bike blind. I had a good idea what I wanted, but I have been so happy with the purchase of this bike. It has been perfect for me.
Okay, so how about the technical stuff? How does it handle the technical features?
it's like a tank, or like a flying tank. So if you can't jump over the rocks or whatever your obstacle is, as long as you can get your front tire up and over it, keep yourself in a neutral position and keep pedaling, it just manages to kind of go up and over whatever is in its way.
Okay, so what was your previous bike?
Well, like I mentioned, a 2013 Hero Flightline 2 29er, thick aluminum frame, mechanical brakes, which are entirely different than hydraulic brakes. You know, it's a solid bike, but we're talking real entry level here, just a step above a Walmart bike.
Okay, so this was a pretty major upgrade.
That is a major understatement.
Okay, so on a similar note, but in the other direction, if you could buy any bike today with an unlimited budget, what would it be?
You know, I'm sort of tempted to say the Yeti SB6. That bike climbed. It's the best climbing bike I've ever ridden. But we didn't get to ride that in a large frame, only in the medium, and I didn't like the way it descended, and that's where the fun factor is at. So, based solely on bikes that I've actually demoed and on real trails, and money being no issue, you know, I gotta say it's gotta be the Santa Cruz 5010 Solo. You know, full spec, full carbon. That bike, it really did blow me away.
Interesting. So not the Bronson.
Yeah, I know, and I love the Bronson, but I recently did a head-to-head on real trails with a Bronson and a 5010, both of them the 2.0 models, and you know, I gotta hand it to the 5010. It climbed amazing, and it was a huge fun factor going downhill there. I think ultimately what I'd like to do is like take those bikes plus maybe a Yeti SB6 in a large frame, and then take those to a downhill park and do those head-to-head all day. And also make sure that all of them have my preferred tire, which is the Maxxis Shorty. Have that on all of them, and then ride all those trails and see which one has the highest fun factor. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, I ride bikes for fun, and having the highest fun factor would be the factor. So if I was going to say, follow up to all that, you know, the bottom line, it'd be the Santa Cruz 5010, but I probably would give some weight to the other bikes based on how they did downhill, because it's a toss-up for me between the Bronson 2.0 and the 5010 2.0. It's so close between the two of them.
Okay, so based on your experience, if someone bought this bike in the exact same condition that you did, what are the 3 most essential upgrades that this bike needs?
Well, I would say a dropper post. I mean, when I got this bike, dropper posts were not standard equipment, and now, I mean, I would consider them essential. So, very first upgrade, right out the bat, get a dropper post. It changes the way you ride the bike.
So that would be number 1. What about number 2?
Well, I would say, you know, on a similar note, the tire size and the width of your rims have changed since this bike was first introduced. So I would say upgrade your rim size to allow a wider tire in tubeless, because if you do anything technical, it is absolutely game changing. I mean, for regular trail riding with a lot of flow, maybe not so much, but definitely anything technical, having the extra traction just makes it's a game changer.
And for your third?
You know, I'm tempted to say brakes, because that's going to be the next major upgrade I make if I make an upgrade to this bike. But you know, honestly, as silly as it sounds, I would say a water bottle holder. I rode this bike for months without putting a bottle cage in it, and it's not game changing or high tech or anything like that. But me and, you know, my buddies that go do it, we call them Gatorade rides. We put a Gatorade in there, and that is the only hydration we take. And so we will only ride as far as the Gatorade will take us up the hill and then bomb down. And it's just, you know, I'm used to riding with a big backpack, a hydration pack, and batteries for cameras and stuff like that. To go for a ride when you don't have all the weight on you, it's just riding for the pure joy of riding. And it's an upgrade that it just makes life more enjoyable, which is why you ride bikes in the first place.
Okay, so new question. Trails and trips. What are your 3 favorite or most memorable trips you've done with this bike?
Well, so far I would say the San Juan Trail in the Ortegas in Southern California. When I did it, it was the middle of the summer. I did the full climb up and then ride out, and that just about killed me because it was just scorchingly hot, and it's like 2,700 foot of climb or something like that. The views are just absolutely breathtaking, especially compared to out here on the East Coast. Just the vistas were amazing. You could see the ocean, you could see just down into the valleys below you, and it was a fun ride out. So that would probably be, out of everything I've done, that has been the most fun, absolutely amazing mountain bike experience I've had.
Okay, so that's number one. What next?
You know, honestly, I'd have to say my hometown trail here, South Mountain in Emmaus, Pennsylvania. That trail is it's a weird combination of like technical, rocky, and then flow. There's no trail or no trails on it that are where you go down and ride up and keep going down and up. It's either you go all the way up and then you come down. There's some loop trails, and it's part of a conservancy, so that's cool because it's not built up like a bike park. All the features are natural. They're designed with, they're just, somebody might move a few rocks here and there to kind of make it possible to do something, but it's all, it's like natural mountain biking. And the other thing about it too is it's a quarter-mile from this door to get to the trail system. So that's huge. I don't got to load a bike. If I want to do dawn patrol, I just literally get up, go ride my bike, do part of the trail system, and be back here, take a shower, and go to work. And that is just, it's an amazing lifestyle to be able to have a trail that's really pretty good right out your back door. I don't know how I would live anywhere else in the country or the world for that matter if I didn't have a trail right here.
And the third?
Well, totally not a mountain bike trail, but I've ridden this bike in the delivery tunnel system in the back corridors of the Mall of America in Minneapolis, Minnesota. There's just something like 99.9% of the people on the planet have not been in, and much less ridden a bike in, much less ridden a premium mountain bike. And although I wasn't really doing anything technical, I was having a blast just goofing off in the tunnel system. And that was very surreal and 100% different than anything I've ever done on a bike. So I would have to say that for me personally, memorable experiences, that was pretty high on the list.
That was pretty awesome. So final question, bucket list. What are the 3 bucket list trails that you must ride sometime in your life? Anybody?
Dude, that's the easiest question in the world. Porcupine Rim in Moab, Utah. Rude Ridge in New Zealand. I think it's the South Island. Could be wrong about that. And then final one is Crested Butte in Colorado. Boom. End of discussion. Done.
I don't know about you guys at home, but those are the same 3 that I got. Huh.
Yeah, I thought you'd like those. And to quote one of my favorite movies, how is this a bad plan? I used the wrong accent, but if you can figure that out, I'll send you a nickel. First person, anyways.
So there you have it. The Santa Cruz Bronson 1.0. So what bikes do you want to see in this series?
Be sure to put your request for bikes in the comments below.
Also, I don't want to limit this to just current bikes.
So if you have one in mind, let me know.
So if you got a classic bike or a specific mountain bike that you'd like to see, put that in the request as well.
And if you'd like to be in this series and have your bike featured in this series, I'd love to work with you.
Especially if you live in eastern Pennsylvania or the surrounding region.
And even if you live outside of those areas, let me know.
I travel a lot for my day job all over the United States, so you never know when I might be in your area. If you want to see more videos like this, be sure to subscribe.
In addition to this series of videos, my channel also features general ride videos, which I call my meager skills, trail tours, and a bunch of non-bike stuff about Jeeps, dad hacks, and why you should never, ever, ever, ever buy a Chevy Uplander. Just trust me on that one.
As always, work hard, play hard, and be a big softie when you get home. Thanks for watching, and have an awesome day.
Cheers. Want to help me pick which videos to produce next? Do you want to see those videos up to a month early? Do you want to see exclusive production stills and making of videos? You can do all that by supporting me on Patreon.